of tech and open source movement across Asia. I am personally very interested on this because I'm personally trying to build an open source community back in the Philippines. And so I'm very, very excited to listen to our very distinguished guests. And before we begin, I highly recommend for you guys to open your Devcon passport and go to today's session and go scroll down to the bottom. You'll see a Q&A button there, so you guys can start asking questions along the way. So later we will have a dedicated time for Q&A and would love to have your questions answered by our distinguished guests. Now, please join me in welcoming Brianna Chang, Phuc Dang, Mario Behling, Mishari Muqbil, and yeah, let's all give them a round of applause, please.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for this very friendly, lovely introduction and welcome here to Thailand and Bangkok. It's really fantastic to be here. So the session now is Voices of Tech and Open Source movement across Asia here. And yeah, we have 3 panelists and I'm your moderator for the day. My name is Mario Behling. It's amazing to see so many folks here, I have to say, who are interested in decentralization and open source, something that I've been passionate about for more than 20 years. And a little bit about me, I co-founded FOSS Asia together with Phuc, who's also here on the panel today, in 2009. And my journey to decentralized tech began already in the 90s when I was still at school, helping to build distributed mesh networks in Berlin. And that sparked a huge passion for me for decentralization. It led me into experimenting with decentralized search engine, alternative journalism, decentralized social media platforms, and taking me on a pretty wild ride. Setting up then later mesh networks in Afghanistan, organizing Jugaad Fest in India, and doing projects in all parts of the world, and of course here a lot in Asia. So with that said, let's dive here into Devcon and into our panelists, introduce the panelists. So today's panel is all about sharing voices of tech and in the open source movement here in Asia, and we have an incredible lineup. So let me start by introducing Mishari first, because he's the local, I want to also give a bit of exposure with the local, usually the ladies first, but of course there's a conflict here. We have the local Mishari here from Thailand, and you have been an incredible 30-year journey in open source. You help organizations to adopt efficient and sustainable practices through data-driven approaches. And you have built several tech communities here in the country and around the world. And we are thrilled to hear more from you in a moment because you've also been involved in the Web3 community. And then I introduce Brianna here. Thank you and welcome. It's all about building ecosystems in AI and Web3 with you. So Brianna is the Chief of Staff and part of the founding team at Virtuals Protocols. Over the years, she's worn a lot of hats: product manager, data consultant, and she was also the director of Ladies Who Code in Malaysia. That's where you're from originally. And really excited to hear more about you in this panel as well. And last but not least, Phuc Dang, the founder of FOSS Asia, has been a major force and advocate for free and open source software and hosting events like the FOSS Asia Summit. Leading diverse teams. You're also involved in an AI interpretation platform for Wikimedia, and on the other side also help to support scaling of open hardware projects in the FOSS Asia community. So that's not the only thing. You also served on the board of major organizations like the Open Source Initiative in the US, the Open Source Business Alliance in Germany, and the IEEE SA Open. So let's get into the discussion. And I have my first question for you. So the topic today is the open source movement. And what is the current state then in the open source movement? Maybe we can begin by that. Brianna, you're right next to me here. What do you describe, how would you describe the current state of the open source movement here in the region?
So I think two fronts, right? One is I personally also interview a couple of people who is doing open source community in the globally right now. I can see that in Malaysia itself, the open source community is growing. In the tech side, a lot of people are like contributing to open source projects. I think mainly is to get more exposure into projects that they never really had in Malaysia. And then second is it helps them to build the portfolio for their own personal growth and also the CV and resume, that the credibility that it can build on that. And then from building community perspective, so we run a Women Who Code back in 2014 all the way until last year before it got dismissed globally, and then we turned it into Ladies Who Code. We can see that a lot of people are anticipating more activities from the NGOs, which is non-profitable organizations. And then there are also a lot of companies approaching us for those open source communities, which I think is a good thing, right? What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I think that, well, I got started in open source in Thailand, right, 30 years ago. And at the time, my access to the internet was a 9,600 BPS modem, right? So it was a very, very different world back then. But we could see this, even from that point, this natural conflict between open source, which and the traditional enterprise software world, right? And at the time, the big guy was Microsoft, and it boiled into the Halloween papers and all that drama. And a few years ago, it was surprising to find Microsoft as a major sponsor of FOSS Asia, right? Wearing T-shirts that said, "I love open source." I thought I was at the wrong conference. But I say that it's a natural conflict. It's a creative conflict, right? As opposing forces are at work to try to figure out what is the best way forward for our society, for software. And so I think that as users, right, as users of software, open source has won. It provides the fundamental building blocks of much of the technology that we use today and rely upon in Thailand, right? So I think that that is no longer an issue. However, there is a difference between Thailand and much of the Western countries where piracy has always been rife, and licensing is more of a suggestion than an obligation. And so people basically see free software as free as in beer. Oh, more free stuff, but without actually having to go to the plaza and spending a few hundred bahts to buy a pirated CD, right? But then there is very little consciousness as to the next level of the opportunities that free and open source software provides. And that is through the involvement in the process of contribution and building up the community, which can build up technical excellence that can solve other problems that we have in the country. But I think that we are starting these conversations now, and hopefully when FOSS Asia comes to Bangkok next year, we will be able to have this conversation with a higher intensity and on a wider scale. Yes.
Interesting. Phuc, and from your perspective, what do you see? How does the open source community and movement differ here in Asia compared to other parts of the world? You have been also to the US, to Europe. What's your experience?
Yes, so first of all, I think this is a very exciting time for open source, and I totally agree with Mishari that open source is a winner. So it's not just something people in the West has been talking about. I think one unique aspect that differ from differentiate the open source movement here compared to the West is the driver of the movement. As you see here in the region, big tech companies like in China, Tencent, Baidu, or Huawei, they contributed a huge amount of solution to the open source space, and also is like driving the shift in the industry. Similar to countries like India, also again, the open source is driven by very big companies like FOSS or Wipro. So it differs a little bit because in the West, the open source started as a grassroots movement, right? A few years ago, as Mishari mentioned, we also have like independent contributors who got excited about open source, but in order to really push the acceleration of the entire ecosystem, I think corporates plays a very important role in the scene of Asia today, and it continues to be this way. So it's pushed. So they have like sufficient funding. They allow the employee to contribute, and also they draw an example for people in the community to see that there are opportunities not only to do something as a hobby for fun, but something that can sustain a business, can sustain your life. And this is the difference that I see here.
So there's the community and corporate side of the world, but all of you have been already in open source for quite some time. Now we see more new people also here at the Web3 event, Devcon. So how do you engage new people in open source, or people who are also like don't even know about open source yet? How do you do that, Brianna?
I think in my community, we host a lot of events, and we also have like distribution channels that going out to tell people that projects that are open source, companies that are actively engaging with those open source community. But I think like in-person events or even online workshops, we run a lot of like tech workshops to teach them hand by hand on how do you contribute to open source projects, how do you learn the skills through those projects. I think those are like the ways that we need to engage the new people in the space at the moment. But I think there's another point that like both of you bring up also is they are really curious on how to sustain their life with just participating with open source projects. And I think that's something that I'm really excited to see how things change. Because I think I interviewed quite a couple of people in the space, and they are saying that they had fun maintaining the open source project, and they think that they learn a lot from that. But it's just that the monetary perspective to sustain their own life with just open sourcing, with just contributing with open source projects is really tough. Because there aren't a lot of like companies that's donating to it, or like people that's willingly chipping in the donations for the people that are maintaining it. So I think like for open source projects, the current challenge that I see is really how to find people that's dedicated to maintain the projects, or even in running in the community, like even our own community projects is very hard for us to maintain as well because we don't pay them. So they do it voluntarily, and when things has to get prioritized, our projects get deprioritized, you know what I mean? So I think that part of things is really something that I'm trying to figure out on how to do it. Yeah.
So then maybe a question is also, what can we learn from existing open source projects projects that you know, run for a long time, they are sustainable. Like they have proven to be thus sustainable. And yeah, I think like Mishari, as you have been so long in the community, maybe you have some ideas. Maybe also the Web3 community. What can they learn from 30 years of experience in open source? What kinds of projects are sustainable, or how to make projects sustainable?
That's a very good question. But before I go there, I actually have a very good story about new people contributing to open source. So many years ago, I worked at a startup, and we were doing a directory of businesses, right? And now I don't know if you noticed, but then the Thai language does not have spaces between words. So when you are trying to get computers to understand the Thai language, it's very hard because it does not know where one word ends and another one began. So it's a business directory, and I did a search for spa, you know, a massage place, and it came out with spaghetti house because the both had SPA in it. And I thought that this is a problem. And I was searching for libraries and tools that can help me solve this problem. None existed in Thailand. There was one by a research institute, but it was available under license. And so I looked at the other countries in the region, and apparently for them it's a national level issue. So they will have plenty of code out in the open to solve this problem. And you know, the tooling was all there. There were many papers written, etc., etc. But very little existed in Thailand. And so I had I was lucky during that time that I was at an event where the minister, the ICT minister was there. And I went up to him and explained to him, look, this is a problem. Can you please do something about it? That went nowhere. And well, my project collapsed, right? But then after a while, I heard that there's someone had started writing PyThai NLP, natural language processing toolkit. And I thought, wow, this is very interesting. And a lot of the data science folks in Thailand were very interested in this, right? So I went around to figure out who the initiator of this project is. And at the time, I believe he was a 9th grade student by the name of Wanapong. That's his GitHub ID. And so the fate of the entire Thai language-related ecosystem rested on the shoulders of a 9th grader, right? And so the entire country has him to thank for. And I asked him, why did you initiate this, right? He said, oh, well, because I didn't want the Thai language to disappear from the internet just because the computers didn't understand it. You know, so I think it's back to this issue of scratching an itch, right? He had an itch. I didn't, and so did I, but I didn't have the skills to do it. He had the skills, the motivation, and he decided to sit down and do something about it. And I think that that's one of the beauties of open source for people who understand it. They can solve their problems for themselves, but they can also solve it for a billion people, right? And I think that that is one motivation for people to come in to join the open source. But then the other one is community. So we have a lot of people who are not really tech related, but enjoy the social aspect, the community aspect, enjoy the intellectual challenge of being with other like-minded people solving similar problems. So when I was very young, I was involved in the distributed cryptographic community. Back in '97, we solved the RSA challenge. And you know, I wasn't, my knowledge about cryptography wasn't that high, but I enjoyed the community. I enjoyed being part of a challenge. I enjoy being a coordinator and helping to make this problem to solve this challenge, to make this a success. And so those are two examples, but people are complicated, right? I mean, probably economists will not be able to understand why people will join projects like this without remuneration, but also at the same time, economists don't really understand why we tip either. So I think that there is a lot of studies that probably needs to be done here about what motivates people. Why would people contribute to open source? And probably we should be building on that, which leads me to sustainability, right? In terms of open source, I think that the one of the biggest drivers of sustainability, well, there are two parts to it as far as I can see, right? One is an anchor. So a group of people who have been there, are dedicated, and who are able to sustain this one way or the other, either as a hobby or through their companies, their organizations, through government grants. The economics factor is a strong incentive to continue working on open source. But also the other factor that makes an open source project sustainable, I believe, is the ability to handle churn. People coming and leaving, because people who don't get paid for open source, they are driven purely by interests through a sense of intellectual curiosity. You know, they want the challenge, but they cannot sustain it for. Often you can't sustain it for very long. So you come and maybe you hang out for a few years, and then you find other challenges that you would like to work on, and that's okay. But to have a system where people can come and leave, and then if they enter, then there is a pathway for them to reach higher levels of trust and respect in the community, I think also helps a lot. And this is in addition to all the other factors that would make an open source project sustainable. Yes.
What about the question of welcoming new people? Because if some people they can't sustain their involvement, their engagement over time, is welcoming new people also a factor? How big is that factor? And yeah, new people and sustainability. What do you think, Phuc?
Yeah, so welcoming new people definitely important. Mishari mentioned, right, the turnover rate. Yeah, so people go all the time. So how do we make sure that there continued flow of new contributors into our projects? I think it should start with education. Yeah, so the sooner we introduce open source to the younger generation, the better chance we have of future contributors. So therefore, we are very happy that FOSS Asia also plays a role into this journey. For many years, engaging with people and network of user group and also different university in the region. We continuously connecting with education institutions, even like on the high school, secondary school level. So we offer like online programs where people can participate, solving very small tasks. You don't even, you don't need to develop a huge system like a website, like application in order to participate. So we try to break out like issue into smaller tasks so that we can engage people with like lower beginning level. And one point that was mentioned earlier, so open source is not only about writing code. There are so many different ways that contributors can participate. Writing a bug report or making a design for a logo, or engage by talking about open source to other students or to the communities around you. So of course, it's there's different ways that people can do, but in order to get how to make it faster, yeah. So everyone can do something, and the community can roll step by step. But I think the biggest chance that we have is how we can collaborate with education institution around the world as well as in Asia. So we have so many schools, so many universities here. How can we talk to people on the ministry level that encourage them to bring open source into education? So open source is not only about talking about the idea, the definition, but about also the technology, what people should learn in school that make them relevant for the market these days. So this is something we at FOSS Asia, together with people in the community in Thailand, in Malaysia, we are all driving forward. So try to make open source as part of the curricula, as part of the education learning journey of students from a very young age. Yeah.
So partnerships are important, partnerships with government, with companies, schools. Now I'm a new contributor. I want to start my own open source group in the university or in school or just like with friends. And I want to establish partnerships or I want to join organizations. So I don't know how to do that. Yeah. And you have experience with the ladies who code, and you had a lot of partnerships, I know. It's like a huge organization. And could you give us some advice? Yeah, so for new contributors or for new people in open source, how to establish partnerships, how important are partnerships? Please tell us more about that.
I think partnership is very important because when you start off as like a small community, right? Usually it was driven by like what you say, interests or like a similar topics that people are highly interested. So that forms like a community that have great minds inside there, and then they start doing things, right? There's like a focus group, there's like a weekly hacking hours that people will just start doing it. Then there has to be like a group of dedicated people to go out and start growing this community. By growing this community, it starts from, I truly believe like words of mouth are the most effective way of growing this community. So when you grow this community, there has to be some way that you can massively grow first, right? Which it involves events, it involves opening up, putting up your products or even putting up your open source project somewhere that's more visible by the crowd and all, and being endorsed by bigger group of communities is also important. So that's where partnerships comes in, right? Whereby if you can get endorsement or like you can get like some sort of partners that can agree with the topics that you talk about or like endorse the projects that you are working, you recruit more talents into this community. You recruit people that really want to know to join this community, and with different minds, you get to grow these projects in a different way, right? So usually in within the Malaysia, when you want to start a community or you have started a community, we sort of know that there's these new projects coming out, and then we will offer help. So it goes by like people that is already very experienced in the space, and then they will know that who you should be talking to, and we will start helping each other out in that sense. And we will also do co-collaborations between different communities so that you can reach out to other group of people, and that people will be able to introduce you to different partnerships and stuff like that. Sometimes we also offer some services that other corporates or even enterprises are looking forward to. For example, maybe we can have some of your people to be speaking in our community so that it taps into their other objective as well, right? Because it's like a two-way thing whereby we want their funding or we want their endorsement, but at the same time, they need something from us as well as a community. So we give them like this free advertisement slot for them to do it, but we try to also filter out companies that does hard selling, because community doesn't like it, right? So we try to balance this out in two sense. And I think if you are new to communities, if you're new to like starting off a new project, one thing really you need to learn, to me personally, is really how you socialize your project out and how do you pick the right partner to get on board into the projects. Yeah.
Okay, so partnerships, but I also hear about mentorships here, what you're doing. So, Mishari, Phuc, how do you provide mentorships? How do young people, newbies, find mentors? How do they, is there like a step-by-step guide for partnerships and mentors, or how do I do it? I'm young, I want to be involved in open source and Web3, so how do you do it?
Well, I think that in East Asia, one of the biggest challenges that we face is getting youngsters to start asking questions, right? Because it is, for those who are not from around here, it's seen as being deeply embarrassing to ask a question, because it is a sign that you may be stupid, right? But then that is usually where it starts, right? Either through the through the process of asking for help, right? In fact, this is how I used to screen people at my last company. So anyone who walked through the door, we will give them a chance, right? But then we will have a challenge given to them. When the trick of the challenge, the way to solve the problem is that you have to ask question of the team, and they will give you that secret that will unlock the challenge, and you will solve it in no time at all. But then if you do not ask questions, you will keep banging your head against the wall, and you will never be able to solve it. And sure enough, we got some amazing people through just this process alone, where we filtered for people who are willing to ask questions. Now, through the mentorship as well, I think that this is the biggest challenge for us. There are people there, there's in the forums, mailing list, other channels, right? And they are willing to answer questions, right, and help provide guidance. But getting people to come in and have the and taking the brave step to admit that they need help and to ask for it and to accept mentorship, I think that is challenging. That being said, East Asian society being deeply hierarchical is also conducive to a mentorship relationship, right? So once that relationship has been formed and there is a trust established, it tends to stay and last a long time. There are good points and there are bad points about this, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, so mentorship program, just to mention that there are programs like Google Summer Code, where FOSS Asia also part of as a mentor organization. So we do offer students and developers an opportunity to work on real open source projects and get connected with the network of mentors from FOSS Asia community. So this is one example. There are also a lot of many hackathons, events, and programs going on around the world. So I believe that there are also fellowship at the Ethereum Foundation, where they offer this kind of guidance and mentorship to new contributors. So if you do care about open source, of course, there are plenty of opportunities. It's just a matter of if we're willing to spend time and dive into the different sector. So there's not lack of programs out there for us to participate. So for us, like, start the journey right away, start to do something. As well as when you mentioned how can you get partnership, how you can get support for your community or program. At first, you need to do something and be consistent. Yeah. So be consistent, be persistent, do something and continue doing, sharing what you are doing with the community, and eventually people will recognize your effort. So my advice would be, started to do things right away. Look up on find your interesting something that is side strategy thing for you. For example, people are here because I believe they care about Ethereum. Look up on the Ethereum website, looking up for different programs that they offer. So besides Ethereum, there are also many open source projects that based on Ethereum or use Ethereum as the infrastructure. So look out for those and check out every project. They all have a community communication channels, either on Discord, either on GitHub or Telegram. Yeah. So that's a huge amount of resources and on GitHub. So the nice thing about now like working on the open source space, so all the contribution, all the code are publicly documented. Yeah, many projects are very good, like beginner guidance. FOSS Asia also have something called the developer best practices on our website. So where it show you step by step how can you participate, contribute to an open source project from beginner level until like more advanced. So keep look out for those and participate in the community from today.
Okay, so but I'm also hearing that there are a lot of career opportunities because Google Summer of Code
Yeah.
and Ethereum. So what are some ways you've seen open source help individuals and teams advance in their career? Or if I'm new to open source, what are my prospects? How could it help my career actually?
So I think a lot of people, they went open source. Passion is one of it. Second is really to build their CV, right? I think it's really inevitable that people comes and go. So some of the people that I found out that they went for open source projects are mainly to build their career. So it's kind of like an indirect way of building it. But if as a hiring manager, if I see that you participate in a lot of open source projects, like the number of PR that you made, significant impact that you did to a open source project, it will be a bonus for me to consider you as a role. Because one is for the fact that you actually went all the way out to look for open source project to contribute, that's like a big thing for me personally. Because a lot of people, they just say that they're interested in the field, but they never really do anything. But for you to be able to contribute in open source projects, that's when you actually spend your time and your effort to maintain the project and keep your curiosity in it, right? So that's number one. Second is you really will learn a lot when you are contributing, because comments will come from different minds, review will come from different experiences as well. And to also support the open source project voluntarily is also something that is encouraging for me. So I think an indirect way of advancing a career, open source, but contributing in open source project is one of the big steps that you can consider, and it's quite unknown. Like unfortunately in the space that I know, that people didn't know that open source, contributing in open source projects is having so much impact into my CV and portfolio. And I think we should let more people to know about that. Yeah. But mine is more indirect way. So I'm not really sure like securing a full-time role in open source project, would that be sustainable or not? Yeah.
Well, I personally, I think that all the work that I've gotten from a very young age. I mean, I got my first job when I was 13, right? And the reason that I got my job is because of my participation in open source projects, because they could see that I had a technical capability at the time, so they hired me, right? And so I think that the open source projects and my contribution to it builds up transparency into what I'm capable of doing. So it's so when people hire me to work on a project, it's not theoretical, right? There is strong proof that that I know what I'm doing, and also there are other people out there who verify it. As well through the forums, etc., etc. So there is a strong social verification process in open source, but also a self-selection, right? But then I have such high a lot of trust in this process, such a high level of trust in this process that I don't send my kids to school, right? We homeschool. And that's because I think that they can follow through the same process no matter what their passions are in the future, right? So for example, right now they are into ants and insects, right? But I don't see why in a few years they can't start contributing to forums, Wikipedia pages on entomology, right? And for that, from that point on, perhaps build up relationships with universities, research institutes, other organizations that are into ants, right? And build up a career based on that. So I think that it provides this opportunity where you said the ability to build up skills, the ability to interact with other people who are way smarter than you. I mean, look at the amount of smart people in this conference, right? And the ability to interact and talk to them. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in this model of career building, where you build up portfolios, demonstrate your skills, write blogs, build various products, have creative outputs, and based on that, people will hire you.
So we don't have so much time left, and I would like to ask you, what would you give to, what advice would you give to aspiring open source contributors or community leaders in Asia, if there were one piece of advice you wish you'd known at the start of your journey in open source? What would it be?
So I would say start with a very small step and continue. Yeah, start something small and stick to it until the end. That's it. Yeah, that would something I would say to the new contributor. You don't need to make something big. Contribute on a very small level, and from there you learn and connect with more people and continue your journey. Start more. That's what I would say. Start small.
Okay. Brianna, what would be your one piece of advice?
Actually, yeah, I resonate with Hong San a lot, because at one point when I wanted to start an open source project, I don't really know how to contribute. And then I remember there was one person that told me, that we just open up, create a pull request as soon as possible so that you can keep the momentum. It can be as simple as just edit the readme, like the read.me, and then just create the PR, and then that's where you keep the momentum on, because the moment you see it merge, the satisfactions will just keep you looking for more things, right? And then the open source projects, they are also very welcoming. Some of it, they actually label for beginner-friendly tasks, a small, not really small, but they label it as like a beginner-friendly, or like that's when you can start as a first one, right? So like my advice is really create your first PR as soon as possible, and then second is look for a mentor that you can look up to in a project. So like people, like what you say, people don't really ask questions, and they feel intimidated to ask questions in a bigger forum group. So having someone that you can trust by asking questions is very important. So I think look for a mentor in the space that you can always go to them when you need advice or even learn something. That is really crucial for me.
For me, in this part of the world, I would the first thing I would recommend to people is to try to make learning fun, right? Try to disconnect, that awful experience of what people call learning that happens in traditional institutions with learning just because you are interested in something, right? And once you and understand that that is a valid part of learning and upskilling. It's no less than learning anywhere else. And once you have fun learning, share what you learn, right? So I really believe that these are the two components that I will tell everyone. Yeah, go out there, learn about something cool related to the project, and come and share, no matter what it is, right? And I think that that's a very good place to start.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, now we transition to the final part of the panel. We have a few minutes left for questions. So are there any questions here from the audience? There's a QR code here on the left-hand side, and you can submit your questions through this QR code. Do we have any questions here from the audience?
Please don't feel intimidated by us.
You just say ask questions, right?
Yes, yes,
I think people have to use the QR code.
yes, they have to use the QR code.
Yeah.
Yes.
So okay, yes. So there are two questions here. So I can see this. If you were to discourage people from joining open source communities, what would it be? Open source is not for you if.
You're not consistent enough.
So, yeah, I'm not sure about this question.
It is
Why
a very
I
good
should
question. It is a
discourage
very good question. It's a very good question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think, okay, so in the past, the open source community had a, well, still to an extent does have a problem with people being very harsh on other people. I actually liked it, right? Because probably because of the way my brain is wired as well. But I think that it meant that doing something or producing an output of a low quality meant that you are going to suffer emotionally for it, right? Okay. So there's this strong incentive to do your best work and check it again before you submit it. Because if you don't do it well, people are going to be harsh on you, right? However, times have changed, right? It becomes, we want to have the wider community, and okay, it might not be as, I don't know, efficient, right? But I think it creates a much nicer community overall. Toxic. So I think that if today I was going to argue that open source is not so much the important part of open source is not the technical excellence aspect, which I would have argued was the case 20 years ago, right? I would say that these days the main strength of open source is the social aspect. So I know that there are many people who are technically excellent but are not sociable, right? I think that it's you know, it becomes a balance. So whereas before you would have to come and you owned the space by being technically excellent, while other people had to come in and they have to learn how to be technical. I think now it becomes the opposite problem, where you come into an open source space to learn how to be sociable, right? And the technical part can, I think, follow as a secondary consideration. It's all about the people.
Phuc, you also have many years of experience in open source, and you know people in the US and Europe, and I think like many years ago, open source had very strong following in Europe before the following in Asia also increased. So is that maybe something that by including more people here in the region, is it something that was positive for the open source movement, and maybe the open source movement was less harsh after welcoming more people here from the region, or I don't know?
So I think the question was, so open source is not for you if you do not care about the world we are living in today. I think open source, and Mishari also mentioned, it's not only about the software, it's about working together to solve a problem. We cannot solve the world problem by being alone. So we need to connect, we need to work with people. So I would say open source is for everyone who wants to survive in this world, in this society. So we need to work together, we need to cross the border, we need to see together how to share ideas and how to fix the problems that the world is facing today. Yeah. Shall we go to the next question?
Yeah, please feel free.
So I think the next one is it how to start the open source community. What is your first step? This is we already mentioned already, right?
Just create a group and start from there.
Yeah, so start with people from share similar interests, and then there is another one. Mario, you want to
What's the first step?
I think there is.
Another one?
Yeah.
How to better bridge the Ethereum community and the broader open source community?
Well, this is the right place. Yeah.
I-
So, yeah, I would say so. Devcon is huge here. In so many people here, so many people representative from different regions, and this is a great opportunity for people from Asia who can come here and learn about what exactly is Ethereum. Yeah. How can people participate? How can people join the community? And I think that it's really nice that there are several talks at the conference related to open source technology, and the Ethereum Foundation also so kind to host the open source hub in the community hub where we got to bring in different open source players and community leaders to come and share about their journey. So this is excellent, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for also hosting this panel, giving us the people from the open source community have a chance to connect with the Ethereum or people in the audience who are interested in the topic. So this is a great opportunity for us to connect.
I think I want to add on this front also. So when we were building community and the open source projects, I noticed that a lot of people are highly interested in blockchain, not just Ethereum, even though it's DevCon, specific topics, right? So we see a lot of projects that has been open source as well that welcome the people to come and participate and all. I think that's like a good move to encourage more communities to join, right? Second is really to tap into those communities and make sure they know about these projects, which making yourself more available or like welcoming is also a second part of it. Having Discords, having like those channels that most of the community lives in, it's key steps to bridge the two communities better in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we have more questions coming in. So one question still, we have the time. How can open source communities help developers build non-technical skills, especially for new developers, for example, public speaking, pitching, and so on? Mishari, what do you think?
Well, I think that I started on that journey, right? About 10 years ago, as I said, I realized that open source is all about the people, not about the technicalities. And I think that that really forced me to be more sociable. And I think that just comes out of actually being humble. You talk to people and being open to feedback about things like were you harsh, were you abrasive, and then I think that you sort of build up from there, because if you're part of a community, you want to build a stronger community, and that doesn't really work in the wider sense if you are not being a people person, right? Yeah. So I think it's just the important thing is to just be very conscientious about what you're doing.
I think open source communities often have a lot of workshops, and they were at least in my community, we also encourage a lot of new people to start their first talk or their first sessions on like hosting a technical workshops, starting from like just a facilitator, slowly going to moderators, and then being a speakers on the stage. That's how I grew from being on the stage right now, being a speaker at the panel, right? So that actually is one of the parts that you can learn about non-technical skills. Second is like what Mishari said. Writing your first review on the PR is also very, very hard sometimes. I don't really know how to write a good review on the PR before you merge it. Giving feedback is also something that is very, that requires skills, right? How do you actually write a good review or a feedback to a person that he will be willing to listen or even picks up, right? So I think those are the skills that you can learn, smaller things within the communities.
But a pro tip for me, I now use ChatGPT extensively to review the level of empathy of my writing.
Yeah, I think level of empathy makes sense.
Yes.
But some people, they literally just write a review and then they copy and paste it, which I think
That too. You can use
you
it in
have
different
to
ways.
edit a bit. Yeah, I think.
But if you want to use it in order to increase your social ability, then ChatGPT is a fantastic.
I use it for grammar check a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so I hope in future we don't only have ChatGPT but also more open source models.
We hope so.
And open source projects in this area, but we don't have time to discuss that today. There's so much more to discuss. So I would like to say thank you, all of us,
Great
for joining.
questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you, the panelists. Been truly inspiring. Appreciate a lot. I hope you all went away or go away with new ideas, with new inspirations, maybe to start your own open source project or to participate in one of these many projects here at the event. So I would like you to give a big round of applause for all the panelists and everyone here. Thank you.